Alright, 안녕하세요. 이종의 single Mondono Shada. I hope you all have been doing well, and just thank you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to this Sunday school lesson. And so, let's begin. Well, beginning with last week, we talked about how God redeems adversity, and so we followed the story of Joseph, and we last left off with him. He was being sold into slavery, and after he was sold into slavery, he was in Potiphar's house, which Potiphar is an officer. I'm not sure, law enforcement or something like that, and he prospered there, but then he was sent off to prison for something he didn't do, which a little joke, he didn't want to give some of his kimchi away. And so yes, and so after that, he interpreted a dream for a cupbearer who worked for Pharaoh. And with him, he finally went back to working for Pharaoh. But then, before he went, he asked Joseph to, Joseph had asked him to remember him to Pharaoh. But then he didn't do it, and which left Joseph stuck in prison for 2 years. And so, suffering in prison for 2 years. And so, throughout all that, it was so that Joseph could trust God more, because he still had that dream. You know how he was good at interpreting dreams? Like, he remembered his own dream back in the past where his brother's pile of wheat bowed down to his pile of wheat. So he knew what that was going to foretell in the future. And so we're in the future right now, and so we're going to know what happens to Joseph and his brothers. And so in this lesson. And so this lesson is called God Overrides Good with Evil. And so before we all begin, I would like for you all to pause the video and read Genesis chapter 42, verses 1 through 6, Genesis chapter 45, verses 4 through 8, and Genesis chapter 50, verse 15 through 21. So please pause the video and read it, and we'll be right back, okay? Alrighty, so thank you so much for reading those passages, and let's get right to it. With the first passage, Genesis chapter 42, we see that Jacob, who is called Israel now, is talking to his sons. And so the famine also hit Canaan, where they're from, as well. And so they were running out of food, and it's been 2 years now since they were running out of food, or the famine occurred. And so he was talking to his sons about how, Egypt has a lot of food, and he ordered them or asked them to go to Egypt to get some food. And so, how Joseph is in Joseph is in Egypt, and he has the food because he's been taking charge of that. Pharaoh put him in charge, and so that's how they have food. And so that was how they were going to be reunited. And so that was God's way of reuniting the brothers. And so once they were finally reunited, Joseph noticed his brothers immediately, but then the brothers didn't recognize him. And then, because even before Joseph was sold into slavery, he was powerless against his brothers, not being able to do anything. But in this case, he had the power to do whatever he wants to his brothers. And so, just with that mindset, it's like if you were in Joseph's situation and you saw the people who hurt you so very much, it's like and you have the power to make them suffer. It's like, would a tiny bit of vengeance fall upon you? Well, yeah, I'd say. If you guys read a little bit further from that passage, I talked about how Joseph, he was pressuring his brothers into answering these questions, and he even locked them up and ordered them to go back to his father and bring back Benjamin, because Benjamin, the youngest one in that case, did not come with them. And so you could say that was a little expression of anger and vengeance, but it could have been worse. And so with the next little passage in Genesis chapter 45, Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers, saying that I am the one that you guys sold to slavery, and now I'm in charge of all this stuff. And then he also talks about how even that everything that he's been through was for God's purpose to bring him there so that he can save his family. If Joseph had not been to Egypt in the first place. He probably would not have met Pharaoh, and then he probably would not have, saved everyone from that famine and saved his family from, the famine. They probably might have all died out and just left Joseph all by himself to carry on that great nation that God had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, I have to do this to remember all three of them. So with Genesis chapter 50, you could say a little backstory. Once Joseph's brothers knew that Joseph was still alive, they went back to their father and said, Joseph is still alive. You want to come see him? And so he did go see him, and he did. Joseph did provide for his family, like I guess his brothers, his nieces and nephews and nephews, and all that stuff. And so, yeah. Yeah, but then as we look at chapter 50 here, we find out that Jacob is gone now. And so his brothers, or Joseph's brothers, thought that, maybe Joseph has been keeping them alive or being a little nice to them all this time because their father was still alive. Because that was one of the things that Joseph pressured them about, asking them about. And so once Jacob died, they thought, maybe Joseph is going to turn his back on us and make us suffer for what we did to him back in the day. And so they were very afraid of that. And so they went to Joseph and said, we are your servants now. And they bowed down to him as well in reverence because they feared for, themselves. They feared for their families. And so it was just probably a lot of fear going on because now Joseph had a lot of power and he could do whatever he wanted to his brothers for in vengeance if he wanted to. But as if you guys have, well, after reading this passage, we find out that Joseph did not have vengeance against his brothers. He thought of it all as, even though they meant evil against Joseph, it all turned out for good. Like if they had not been evil to Joseph, Joseph probably would not have went to Egypt or become as great as he is without that initial start. Even though that initial start was evil, something good came out of it because God still had a promise to keep for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Alrighty, so that was my message for today. I hope it encouraged you and you learned a lot from it. And so we will see each other back next week. Alright, so until then, God bless, alright?